and she wants to know what undergarments Amish women wear. Why don't I personally wear the head covering? What does it mean to be conservative Mennonite? Hey everyone, so glad you're joining us again. We've been getting a lot of questions from you guys about some of the things we've been recording. I have Pepper Herzog with me, my puppy. She's getting big, isn't she? For those of you who are regular listeners, Pepper, she just had a bath. She smells like coconut. Yes, she does. Sounds fresh. I have bad news for you, Sarah. It's not as exciting as you think. Amish women wear underwear just like you and me. Probably the biggest difference is the practicality. I have seen on Amish wash lines, have seen them in Amish stores. Very basic. White cotton underwear and white bras. Not a lot of bling bling and lacy and underwire push-ups. No, nothing like that. But if you were to go to your friendly neighborhood Kmart and you looked in the old lady section, that's pretty much what they're going to wear for their undergarments. So not Victoria's Secret. The Mennonites are hundreds of different subgroups, and each subgroup has its own rules and regs. So you have, on the one side of the spectrum, you have individuals who would drive horse and buggies. They would go to the 8th grade. They wear very plain, conservative uniform clothing. Women in traditional roles, 8th grade education. On the flip side, on the other side of the spectrum, still Mennonite, still says Mennonite on the church, there would be people like Scott and I. So we would be considered progressive Mennonites. In our version of Mennonite, there is a lot of pants that women wear. We have women in our church who are medical doctors and work in the workforce. We tend to have less children because we believe in birth control. We go to college, we travel. So in a lot of ways, the mainstream evangelical Protestant faith is very similar to the Mennonite faith. Mennonites run the gamut. I view, as an Italian American from New Jersey who married into this, I view anything that's middle of the road Mennonite to the conservative side as conservative. So this would be churches like the one Scott grew up in. Women, up until the time that he left in the late 90s, would have worn coverings in church, dresses. Pretty much everyone went to the 12th grade, but not really a lot of like university degrees floating around there. Additionally, it would be a more homogenous demographic, Germanic background, rural communities. It really does run the gamut. Now, I have been asked the question by conservative Mennonites who think that Scott's church was not conservative at all. They view the church that Scott was raised in as kind of progressive. Again, it's all about your perspective. It's about where you come from that dictates it. There's no set rule in the Mennonite Confession of Faith that says this is the rating from a 1 to a 10 on conservative. So if you have more questions about that, I'm happy to revisit that one. And actually, it's a great timing for the follow-up because it kind of speaks to that level of the spectrum of what is Mennonite conservatism. We attend a church named Forest Hills Mennonite Church. It's a part of a conference called Mennonite USA, probably one of the most progressive Mennonite churches that's out there. In our particular church, while people are more than welcome to dress conservatively, the church does not in any way require or encourage it. It really kind of is on your own conviction basis. So like, for example, in our Sunday school, I think there might be like one woman who wears a covering and maybe 2 others that would wear skirts all the time. But other than that, the rest of us kind of look like, you wouldn't know if you bumped into us in the mall that we were Mennonite. But that is not necessarily the case for other Mennonite conferences where either it could be encouraged, strongly encouraged, required, and so it really does depend on that. To answer your question, Jane, I don't have a conviction to wear the covering. I understand the biblical basis for it. Many more progressive Mennonites believe that the covering was a cultural issue in the time of Christ. In a time where women, when they did not cover their heads, it was kind of like a loose, sexy woman. We believe in our church that that would have been a cultural thing of the day, not necessarily a requirement by God to wear a covering. So the verse that is often used to decipher the covering question mark is 1 Corinthians 11, 5 through 6. So check it out. We'll put it on the bottom of the screen, but that's kind of like the big question mark scripture about the head covering. Without a question, hands down, I have had to adopt the Mennonite cultural aspects way more. And part of the reason is this: we live in the middle of the Amish country. So we bought the family farm. So we live on a 23-acre property surrounded by old order Amish and Mennonites. If we had decided to get married and move to Jersey, I don't know if I would be answering this question the same way, but our day-to-day life really is surrounded by the culture that we live in. And I think that's the same for a lot of people. In our specific situation, I would cook more Mennonite food, speak more with a little bit more of a Pennsylvania Dutch accent, which I never notice it. And my mother is always very quick to tell me this. Different foods that we've adopted into our regular meals. We have roadside stands aplenty here. We often will have homemade bread or, homemade pies or cakes or fresh produce in the summer. I think that it's probably safe to say that I have had to adopt more of the Mennonite culture and respect in order to live peacefully here. Because I think that if we don't bloom where we're planted and we're fighting against the system, I don't think that that's always necessarily helpful for our own image and also for our own psyche. Whew. So this is a good one and more complicated than I can even express. But the short answer is we have decided that we are raising our son Kiefer in the Mennonite faith. Now, that is not to say that there is not a way broader group, a greater group of billions of people throughout this planet who are Christians. They might worship differently, they might dress differently, or the culture might influence the Christianity as they understand it. But in our case, we live here. Scott was raised this way. I have married into this way. And so we have chosen that we will raise our son progressive Mennonite. He also attends a progressive Mennonite high school, which he absolutely loves. They have a fantastic drama program, and he loves being a part of shows backstage. For me, I am very actively involved in the church. I love my church. I love the people in my church. But there are definitely some things that I struggle with to this day, and that's okay. I think that if we're questioning what we believe in, no matter what religion we are, I think that's a positive, not a negative. We always want to be challenging ourselves. I have actually never attended a Sunday morning church service at a conservative Mennonite church, although literally our farmland bumps up to one of the most conservative Mennonite churches in the area. Every single Sunday, we see folks dressed up for church, coming back and forth on buggies, bicycles, walking, all of our neighbors. We always say hi. I feel like I kind of have seen the outsider perspective of that for the last 20 years, but I've never actually sat in on it. But I can tell you eyewitness reporting from our daughter. Our daughter, Taisha, she went quite a few years ago with our neighbors. She was actually very good friends with one of their daughters. Talk about polar opposites, those two girls, but they really got along and they had great laughs. Taisha was invited to this Sunday morning church service. The benches have a back on them, but there's no cushion. She said it was about 2.5 hours in High German. The women sat on one side, the men sat on the other. Everyone was very nice. She said the neighbors already knew who she was, obviously, because she literally lives next door to the church. So it wasn't like a brand new person. I've actually been invited several times by my neighbors, and I just chose not to go for no reason other than it's long and uncomfortable. Is that wimpy? Thanks, Robert. Thanks for drawing attention down here. For those of you who missed that episode, Scott's family has an antique tractor, and I was coerced into learning how to drive it. I never saw Scott so happy in his life to be laughing in my face at how ridiculous I looked. But that's okay. That is part of this show. Is I said to myself before we even started it, I am okay with making a complete fool of myself. This show is not about showing all of the pretty fluffy stuff. Let's show the real stuff. The answer, Robert, is it was actually quite comfortable. That is a deep cushion on that sucker. The engine was moving around, so it was like, and so, kind of, shock value, whatever. But I have to say that it was not a bad cushion. And if I was spending hours and hours in the fields, plowing my fields on the John Deere 2510, I would have to say my derriere would not walk into the house and be uncomfortable. You're gonna have to wait for another episode on that one, guys, because that's like a whole separate show. But I hope that you have enjoyed this. If you have any that have sprouted up in your mind after watching this video, please go ahead and put them in the comments section, because we are tracking this stuff and we want to make sure that we are answering all of your deep philosophical questions about Scott and Kristen Herzog and how in the world this has worked and we are still sucking air after 26 years of marriage.